It's Lester in your lounge with Good Morning Cape Town. We take the show on the road every Wednesday or every first Wednesday of the month, and we ask you to invite us into your home, and we are graciously being hosted by the first resident of the Western Cape Province, Premier Alan Winde, along with his wife Tracy. Will join us later in the morning, but I'm coming to you from the official residence of the Premier, Leeuwenhof. We're broadcasting from a very special lounge where there have been official tete-a-tetes taking place between not only the current sitting Premier, but the Premiers that have occupied the office and this home since 1994. Real historical value. The Leeuwenhof estate set up in 1693. I think it was Simon van der Stel who gave it to a businessman called Van Heems, and then from there it changed hands. It was the residence of the first speaker, I think, of the Union of South Africa, sold to the South African state in the 1930s. It's been in the hands of the state since then, and since 1994 it has been the residence of Western Cape Premiers, and the current resident sits here beside me. Good morning, Premier. How are you doing? How do you like having broadcasters and techies and journalists and producers at your home before 5 o'clock this morning? Have you ever had a meeting in this lounge before 6?
Morning, Lester. I'm sure we have. I mean, we don't worry too much about time these days, but morning, great to have you here.
No, thank you very much.
It's an honor to be able to host you.
What does it feel like living essentially in what is in a museum?
Yeah, it feels like a museum. And of course, it's very managed by heritage, and, it's got its rules, etc. But I think since Tracy and I got here, we try to change a few things. Maybe a correction. You spoke about the box in the corner.
Van Riebeck's box.
Van Riebeck's box. Yes, it was actually his medicine chest when he was sent to Southeast Asia, and he was actually found guilty of corruption and sent back to Holland to face the music. And on his way back as this medical doctor, the ship stopped in Cape Town. He thought, wow, this is a great place. So he convinced them in mitigation of sentence, sent him back to Cape Town. Yeah, and then it became a treasury. But maybe I just want to add one other thing. You also said something about the slave quarters.
Yes.
The slave quarters, Tracy and I turned it into an art gallery now. I can't remember. I think you said it was a guest house.
Yes.
So it's an art gallery now, run by an NPO. And really it's about saying how can people who specifically trace their lineage back to slavery tell their stories in their art and use that space. So it is a gallery. We turned it in early, I think, February 2022 into this gallery, handed it over. It's open on the first Saturday of every month that people can come and have a look at the gallery, and they hold functions, etc. And then, of course, this was originally, vegetable farm for the ships, and so we planted vegetables again. So Tracy can tell you a bit about the vegetable gardens and the soup kitchens that we support through those vegetable gardens. But it's a very historical place, and it's a working space. We have massive dining rooms. So it's always these Westgrow business dinners or investor dinners. We have the lawns where we use the education tents in the early part of the year where they recognize the learners in our province. Or we have international relations uses the place quite a lot.
Not to throw babies out with bathwaters, it is a very important historical and heritage space which, as part of being Premier, you are afforded to live here. Other provinces have sold their Premier homes. Of course, a different history, for example, the Premier of the Northern Cape said, well, we don't need a Premier household. I think Gauteng did the same. Not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I note that you're trying to make this space accessible because of its heritage value, particularly telling the story of slavery on which what we now call South Africa economy was built on.
Yeah, absolutely. It was I mean, when I was first elected, Tracy and I never moved here for the first year. I'd actually said to the team, let's have a look at, shouldn't it go to a hotel, or shouldn't it, how else can we use it? It's very complex with the planning and zoning, and there was opposition within my own ranks. I thought, well, there's my competition. But when we were moved here just before the pandemic, if you remember those early Digicons, because we stayed in the cottage up at the top, and the Digicons were hosted here during the pandemic. But that gave us the opportunity to get to understand this property. And that was what stood out for me first. The building, if you go out to the front of this building that we're in right now, you'll see all the plaques that tell you about the whole history. It's got the heritage plaques. All the buildings have got their heritage plaques. The slave quarters did not have a heritage plaque. It was kind of like that was at the back, so it wasn't recognized. So what we did was we said we want its heritage plaque. We want its history known. So also if you go in now, you'll see all the history is written up. And some interesting parts of the history of this house. One of the owners, Olaf Berg, actually married a slave.
Oh, that is a fascinating story of South Africa's. I forget her name. Maria was a first name, but she was
Anna de Koning.
Anna de Koning, yes, Anna de Koning. She was the wife of Olaf Berg, and when he passed, she inherited his wealth. So at a point in time in South Africa's history, the richest person, not woman, the richest person in South Africa was a black woman who was a former slave. That is a tremendous, interesting quirk of our history of South Africa.
Exactly. She came here as a child. Her mother was brought here into slavery. She then owned this property after, and then their daughter again also carried on. She ran this property. Anna de Koning also ran Groot Constantia.
That's right.
So, but those stories were never told. They were, they were pushed to the back. And so now that story and her daughter's story can be told through this property, which is great to be able to do that.
Let's talk about unemployment numbers. A glimmer of hope that South Africa and some of the interventions are working. 300,000 more jobs created nationally, 75,000 jobs created in the Western Cape. Falls down to below 20%. Is 20% for you a psychological marker that we celebrate in this province and hopefully in other provinces soon, that we do have an unemployment rate of below 20%?
So the sad thing is, yes, I mean, 20% is still crazy. It is way too high, but it's been the stubborn mark. I know last year I thought, wow, we're going to get below 20, we're going to get below 20, and we never managed it. I thought with the bumper tourism season, we were going to get below 20 from last year's tourism season, but it just would not go. And so it was really great to see. It's only just below 20. And as you said, there's 75,000 jobs in the last quarter. And we've just got to make sure we sustain that and keep pushing. I talk about the bumper tourism season, but it's got to be more than just tourism. It's tourism, it's agriculture. Those are the big numbers. But I look at construction. If you just drive around the city, if you drive around municipalities, you see cranes everywhere. So that's also a very good sign. Investment is the big driver of jobs and we still see that happening. So, yeah, I'm should I say cautiously optimistic. It's very easy to bump it back up again over 20, but it is a marker, and I'm very, very happy about it.
The allocation of national budgets to province in the departments that provinces do control, and that is health, that is education. We've spoken about budgetary shortfalls when it comes to the freezing of teachers, contract teachers positions. 2,400 contract positions are at risk. If we're looking at a budget that the Western Cape government controls, you've also diverted money from programs to safety and security programs, and the LEAP program does appear to be working in areas in trying to drive what's known as murder stations, where murder rates are high. We have seen some improvement, But is there any more flexibility that the Western Cape government does have to try and safeguard 2,400 more jobs? Because, as is expected, the Western Cape is a growing province. Usually, December, we see a in-migration to this province. We're going to have more kids from other province in this under the Western Cape government's administration. Can we afford not to look for more money? And I know that there is contestation between national and provincial government in that regard.
Yeah, so I mean that's the fight. What is our fair share? I mean our division of revenue and the way it is decided through the processes of how much rand you should get in each province based on a whole lot of factors. What's your poverty levels like? Do you have mud schools or not? Those all determine the division factor. But we're saying now that we don't get our fair share. If you look at what our numbers are based on, if you look at the formula, how much we get per person, and of course, with years and years and years of people moving here to look for opportunity, whether they're looking for a job or they're looking for healthcare or education, that puts a bigger burden on the fiscus, and we are fighting for our fair share. And then what happens is, over and above that, when you have other influencing factors. So it could be, as happened last year, we're in the middle of the year, you've already got an approved budget, and then we get a higher than budgeted for an inflation rate salary increase. Then we have to find that money within your own envelope. So last year, if you remember, that was an extra 1.1 billion rand that we had to go and find, and that 1.1 billion then draws through to every year. And so, yeah, it's a big fight. We declared a dispute. We'll be putting the budget on the table now with the Minister of Finance in our own MTBPS, fighting for our fair share. It comes back too late to us. And of course, we've also got to look within our own budget. How do we divide it up? You spoke about what I did 5 years ago on the LEAP safety plan. In the bigger picture, it's 1%. And we're saying that, that kind of money, the benefit it has if you reduce the murder rate just in our health system is massive. But these are the debates that you have around how do you budget with your money.
You were telling me during the break, Premier, that the main bedroom at Leeuwenhof is actually called the Madiba bedroom. Why?
So it's the bedroom straight above us where we are in the lounge now, the one that looks at the mountain. And that is the room that Nelson Mandela was put in after he was inaugurated as president, post the elections in 94. He then comes to Cape Town as the president to make his first speech at Parliament. The official residence, Genadendal, as it is today, was not, it was still the previous president's residence, and wasn't ready for him. And they didn't think they should put him in a hotel, because the hotel would be mobbed. If you think about how many people were on the Grand Parade, if the word got out, I mean, it would be very difficult to protect him, etc. And they decided, this was the administrator's house, they decided this is where they're going to put him. So it's called the Madiba room. And there's some nice anecdotes and stories about Mandela staying here in this house, and, finishing his touches on his speech while looking at the mountain, and then going off to Parliament.
Yeah. Premier, I'm very aware of the privilege that I live in as a middle-class South African who goes on radio and talks about the most vulnerable. I'm sure you are quite aware of the privilege to live in a state house. It's very, very beautiful, but also having to deal with the issues that affect people. We have a housing waiting list in this province of 600,000 people. That's applications, which means you times that by 5, that's 3 million people that would need to be housed. What keeps you up at night? What keeps me up at night, even though I live in a bubble of privilege, and I'm sure you also have those thoughts. What keeps you up at night?
Beyond the ghosts of Leeuwenhof. But, I mean, everything that drives me actually at the end of the day is jobs. And because nothing, I mean, what I say is nothing stops a bullet like a job, nothing gives you dignity like a job, and nothing puts food on your table like a job. And that's why these jobs numbers are so exciting for me, where we start to see more and more. But, that's the sort of pinnacle of changing people's lives. So, it's about how do we fix that unemployment. You'll know if I speak to municipalities and our own government, I ask them questions. I say to them, will we have more shacks or less shacks in 2030? And everybody looks at me and says, we're going to have more shacks. Now, that cannot be. It cannot be. There's got to be different ramp-up programs to change it. And we spoke about the budget. Our budget is under pressure because, in actual fact, in South Africa at the moment, we've got 0.4% GDP growth rate. That's way below inflation. We have to get the growth rate right so that we can create jobs, that we can really start to change people's lives.
Primedia, Winde, I know that your job starts now. You have a meeting at 7 o'clock. Thank you so much for at least allowing us to stay and do the rest of the show.